company? And second, how that traditional culture was hurting the company as you began to understand it.
Well, I don't think it was hurting the company because we're talking about 1994, and the ideal worker of the times who had worked their way up the company was still the white male who worked outside the home with a wife taking care of the home. Those are the people that ascended to the top of all corporations, not just PepsiCo. The fact that Wayne Calloway, who grew up in that system, made such an outreach to get me into PepsiCo demonstrated to me that PepsiCo was very keen on bringing diversity into the ranks, into the senior most ranks, and that too bringing somebody in who's outspoken, who was different, who was a globalist. And they're saying, hey, look, come into this company. We want to change. We want your kind of thinking in our senior ranks. And guess what? Wayne said, I'm going to make sure that I develop you and mentor you. And it was not just Wayne, Bob Detmer, who was CFO at that time, who actually was my boss, was an unbelievable supporter and mentor who made me feel very, very welcome. So the fact that 15 of the 15 men who occupied senior positions were all white men was not a judgment I was making. I'm just saying that was what I observed. But they made me feel very, very welcome in a company where, the brands were iconic American. The business model was not something I was really used to. I didn't know restaurants because we owned KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut. I had to learn everything from scratch. But the BCG training helped me, really get my feet wet. But I must say, I would not call PepsiCo an old-fashioned company. I'd call it a youthful, progressive, welcoming company. And had they not been that, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Useful point. You mentioned the PepsiCo brands of the time, Pizza Hut, KFC, Taco Bell. And one of the interesting business stories you tell in the book is about the painful decision for a company that thought of those brands as part of the family of brands that they all nurtured. The decision to spin off that restaurant business. Tell us about that. Tell us why it hurt. Tell us why it was the right thing for PepsiCo at the time.
Great question. I think when the restaurant business, especially the quick serve restaurant business, the QSR business, was growing in leaps and bounds, and what you really needed was the financial capability to build restaurants, get franchisees, and grow fast, PepsiCo was very good at it. When the growth rate in the quick serve restaurant industry slowed down because every new unit you built cannibalized an existing unit you had already. So the overall growth rate slowed down. You had to move from your financial skills to a service culture where you actually worried about in-restaurant service, how you treated customers. A very different group of people needed to get involved. PepsiCo is full of bright young people and packaged goods people who love to do brands, advertising, marketing, but we were not a service culture oriented business. So it became very clear to us that we needed to unfetter the restaurant business from the packaged goods culture. So it was not a separation, it was an unfettering of the restaurant business from the packaged goods company. And when we did this, painful though it was, the restaurant business began to soar under the leadership of Andy Pearson and then David Novak. And it did exceedingly well, way better than it would have done under a PepsiCo. And PepsiCo could then focus on all the packaged goods that it was very good at and did very well on its own. So I think the biggest learning from all of this is we all might get into businesses, but we have to know when that business and the driver of that business value is not what the company is good at managing against, and know when to separate it out from the mothership. And that's what we did in 1996 with the restaurant business.
Famously, PepsiCo and Coca-Cola have been battling for market share, two iconic now global brands. You write in your book that there was almost a complex at Pepsi about Coke, about the way Coke managed its business. Coke, was a darling of Warren Buffett. It had some iconic CEOs, Grisetta, Muhtar Kent. It seemed to be the very definition, as I remember, as a business editor, of what a global company was all about. How did you regard the Coke challenge, if you will, when you were at Pepsi? What did you learn from them? What are you glad you didn't try to emulate?
Well, we were very different companies that were both competing head to head as if we were the same company. There was a company with 100% beverages. We were, 45, 50% beverages. Their trademark red brand was 70% of the company's revenues. For us, brand Pepsi was 25% of the revenue. So they were very different companies. But here's an interesting story. Uh, uh, we always viewed ourselves as a timely company competing against what we call a timeless company, because Pepsi was about the next generation, choice of a new generation, living for now, shaping the future. The other brand was about maintaining traditions and staying exactly the way they were. So here were two great companies competing in the beverage business in very different ways, but made us both better. And I'll tell you one thing, had we not had the company down south, the red company down south as a competitor, we would have invented a company to go fight against, because PepsiCo does the best when we have a great competitor, real or imagined, that's coming after us, that brings out the creative juices, that makes us want to do more. And I think if you look at the Roger Enrico years, when the battle between the two companies was intense, that's when the creative juices of PepsiCo came out, the Michael Jacksons, the Britney Spears, all of that great advertising that people talk about even today, with a big smile and with a sort of a step in their movement, all came because PepsiCo was competing so aggressively with the company down south.
Those were fun corporate wars to watch, and I should have mentioned Roger Enrico's is one of those hero managers that we read about. But one more work question, then I want to turn to the other part of your book that fascinated me. At a certain point, you say that you were concerned that Pepsi, at least in its beverage and snack business, was in the sugar, fat, and salt business, and that you just didn't feel comfortable with that. So you begin to buy some different brands. You buy Tropicana, you buy Quaker Oats, which has Gatorade as part of its business. Huge move for Pepsi. So and then you come up with this idea that your company is going to be about performance with purpose. Just describe that transition, trying to think about the company in somewhat different terms from, the Michael Jackson, beverage of young people to something different.
So the big companies, we are built to last. We have to keep reinventing ourselves for the future, because if we don't, we atrophy and we die over time. And the best way to reinvent yourself and future-proof yourself is to look at the mega trends. What are the big trends, 10 years, 15 years out, that could be majorly disruptive for us today? And how do we make sure we make the changes so that we are not caught flat-footed when these trends come upon us? We did such an exercise, and it became very clear that consumers were shifting their tastes to healthier products. Not super healthy products, but healthier products, lower calorie products, products with some nutrients in it. And a lot of upstarts were coming and taking away all of the growth. So if the overall market was growing at 5 to 6%, the upstarts were growing 30, 40%, and the mainline companies were growing 2 to 3%. To me, that was an existential threat, because we were giving up on this big opportunity resulting from the consumer taste shifting. And if we kept this up, pretty soon these upstarts, we would have to buy them at some ridiculous multiple, or they were going to start replacing us as the incumbent company. Now, when you see these trends, not just based on the research you're doing, based on your own eating and drinking habits, the drinking and eating habits of your own employees, who are all consumers, you realize that you have to do something about it. So that was one trend. The second is that when we analyzed our own PepsiCo business, before 10 a.m. in the morning, people did not consume a PepsiCo product. So from the morning, midnight to 10 a.m., no PepsiCo product was consumed. So the breakfast day part was open to us. And most people eat and drink healthily during breakfast. So the first thing we did was bought Tropicana because that was a breakfast beverage that was much loved. Then we bought Quaker Oats, which again was a iconic health and wellness breakfast cereal. And so that now opened up the breakfast day part. And then we started to shift the entire portfolio to say, we're not walking away from Pepsi. We're not walking away from Mountain Dew or Doritos or any of that stuff. Those are awesome products. I'm a consumer myself, but we're going to balance the portfolio. We're going to take these fun for you products, provide the consumer with a whole bunch of better for you products, reduce the salt, fat in our snacks, dial up the 0-calorie products and beverages, and then massively dial up the good for you products. Gatorade just for athletes, the Quaker Oats, the Sabra hummus, the Naked Juice, dial those up. And so the portfolio was going to be fun for you, better for you, good for you. And we were going to nudge consumers by putting the better for you products at eye level so that we can slowly transition customers from the fun for you portfolio to the better for you portfolio, but keep them within the PepsiCo family, as opposed to having them go off to young upstarts or other beverages that promised a lot, but in reality, what was in the bottle or can wasn't really what was on the label. But they could get away with it because it was small companies. So this was a significant transformation, but it was done with the intent to future-proof this company in light of the changing consumer trends. And change takes time. So we had to make the investments and execute upon the change program.
It's fascinating. It's almost a social history of America seen through your company, your corporate life. So I want to turn now to the other part of your book, which is a very frank discussion of your life as a woman manager, the issues of work-life balance. There's a lot of straight talk in this book. I'm going to quote you a couple of passages. One you say, I think women are held to a different standard from men when it comes to celebrating their professional accomplishments. No matter what we do, we're never quite enough. That's a expression of frustration. I'll bet so many of us have heard at home. What is that sense that women have that it's never enough? They can never satisfy all the demands on them.
I mean, I would love to get an answer to this question, David. I'm searching for it. It's amazing. A woman is either too loud or too soft. She's too emotional or she's got no commitment. She comes across as too passionate, or, she's dressed too female or dressed too male. For some reason, we feel like we have to paint women into one of two extremes and make it out that both extremes are wrong. So women can never be just a woman and just a executive and just a manager. We have to give them a negatively tinged badge. And second is this prompts this discussion, which I talk about, I think, in one of the later chapters, the and but. When we evaluate a woman, we go, this woman has done all the things we asked her to do, but this is the one thing she still has to prove, or, but I don't like this part of her performance. When it came to men, and I'm not trying to male bash, I'm just giving you a fact. When it came to men, this guy did pretty good. He delivered on most of his commitments, and he's got great potential, and he's going to conquer the world. Hang on a second. You just said she did everything, but he didn't do all of it. And why do we have this and but phenomenon? And I've never gotten a good answer to it, but I've seen this time and time and time again. And the only explanation I can give is the ideal worker is still viewed as the male, the 9-to-5 job, somebody who's got no family commitments that encroach upon their business life. And somehow everybody's judged against this person. And I think that time has come for us to rethink all of these thoughts and habits of the past, because the ideal worker of today and tomorrow looks very different and should look very different.
You have another to me, moving discussion of your own the husband and partner, Raj, who was a business success in his own right at Hewlett Packard and other companies. But you say this, in the crunch years for working women with growing kids and a demanding job, I think our spouses do take a back seat, and they have to be able to handle it. It's a very frank discussion of a problem, again, that I'll bet a lot of households of our viewers have thought about. Talk a little bit about how your husband, Raj, had to take that back seat as your career was just on a rocket ship.
You know, my husband's always said that my list goes PepsiCo, PepsiCo, PepsiCo. Then he'll say, it's your kids, as if they were just my kids. Then he'll say, it's your mom. Then he'll say, somewhere in the bottom is me. My answer, jokingly but painfully, was just be happier on the list, which is not a good answer. But the fact of the matter is, the job was all consuming. It was all consuming for me as a CEO, as it is for men when they are CEOs. But it was all consuming because not only did I have to do the job, I also had to battle all of the little social battles I had to fight day in and day out. So I'd come home completely exhausted, intellectually exhausted, emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted. When I saw my kids, although they were a bit grown up now, focusing on them was most important because mommy was home. They had so many things to discuss with me, and they were both daughters. So I gave them my undivided attention, whatever I could when I got home. And then, just bustling about, making sure whatever required my attention at home, I gave it the proper time and care. But then when my husband comes home, I don't have the energy and time for him. And in those days, you need a very understanding spouse to say, you know what, let me see how I can give her a hand to ease some of the issues that she's going through when she comes home. And that's what Raj did so brilliantly. He'd say, hey, let me take care of these home issues. Don't worry about it. You spend time with the daughters, read all the stuff you have to for the next day. I can see you've got 3 bags of stuff to read. Go do it. And you and I can chat on the weekend when we get a free time because I have some things to go over with you. So he was very, very accommodating. But it's not just Raj. I think it's his family. His entire family, his parents, his uncles and aunts would always call and say, how is Indra doing? Is she okay? Do you want us to come out and give you a hand? And they would tell Raj, make sure you support her. Make sure you give her all the encouragement. So I had not just a spouse, I had his whole family, which was highly unusual, that were proud of me, that supported me and gave me the tailwinds I needed. I don't think I could have done it without that entire ecosystem of support.
There's so many other things I'd like to talk about in this book. It's called My Life in Full. It fits in such an interesting way with the political debate we're having this very week about whether human infrastructure, support for daycare, for elder care, for all the things that bolster family life is worth spending a whole lot of money on. I want to thank Indra Nooyi for being our guest. It's been a wonderful discussion. Come back and see us. Thank you, Indra.
Thank you for having me, David. Appreciate it.
So we'll be back with more great programming on Washington Post Live. Go to WashingtonPostLive.com to register. Check out the shows we've got coming up and sign up for them. We'll look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks for joining us this morning.